here is the new hero of the Nikon F series, the Nikon F3. If you haven't seen the previous two episodes on the Nikon F series, I suggest you see those first, then continue with this one. In the previous two episodes, we saw the rise of the first Nikon F, the legend, the feared conqueror, the destroyer of long-established empires such as the press cameras, TLRs, the foldables, and most of the rangefinder cameras. More than any other, Nikon successfully challenged the reputation and the dominance of the German camera industry. Nikon F2 followed as the new king in 1971. It had to improve on everything that the original legend did 12 years earlier. It clearly had the DNA of the original Nikon F and carried the burden of backward compatibility, and yet it didn't disappoint. It held its own against other Japanese competitors, which were themselves highly motivated, innovative, and relentless. F2 was just sufficient to hold Nikon at the top of the camera industry for another decade. But during that time, the industry was changing rapidly. Olympus came up with small, light, and highly competent OM professional cameras. Minolta was keen on advancing the electronics and TTL light metering. Pentax was a competent crowd pleaser. Canon, after the introduction of its own F1 professional camera, was constantly aiming for the top ranking, with the best chance of surpassing Nikon. Then in 1985, the empire strikes back, with the results of the Carl Zeiss secret Project 13, the Contax RTS. That was a shock. A very advanced professional camera, superior to most others, born fully grown with its own extensive ecosystem.
To create a lens fine enough to match the quality of this precision instrument, Contax chose the world's most respected optics expert, Carl Zeiss.
Another trend was emerging. Leica had already married Nikon's competitor Minolta. Carl Zeiss had courted Pentax, but then married Yashica. What next? Oh yes, the era of superstar designers. Olympus had its hero camera designer, Mr. Yoshihisa Maitani. Contax got itself Ferdinand Alexander Porsche of Porsche Design Studio. Nikon had to do something really spectacular. It had to tick off and improve on everything that the competition was throwing at it. This could not be done with the shackles of full backward compatibility. New directions had to be explored. This needed new blood. Red blood. So Nikon reached out to one of the most famous and prolific industrial designers of all time, the Italian superhero, the maestro Giorgetto Giugiaro, the founder of Ital Design. The result was the launch of Nikon F3 in 1980. It was finally time to say goodbye to the king Nikon F2.
Time to say goodbye.
Maestro Giugiaro went on to design numerous other Nikon cameras, including all the professional cameras F4, F5, and F6. Some of these, such as the F5, became the design foundation of later Nikon digital SLR cameras until the very last one, the Nikon D800 series. Giugiaro's company, Ital Design, styled more than 200 vehicles for many prestigious brands which sold tens of millions of vehicles. These included the Alfa Romeo Alfa Sud, Lotus Esprit, VW Golf, Bugatti EB112, Saab 9000, BMW M1, Subaru SVX, and many others. His cars were featured in movies, for example the famous DeLorean DMC-12 in Back to the Future, and one of the James Bond cars based on Lotus Esprit S1 in The Spy Who Loved Me. Giugiaro also designed numerous consumer products, such as watches for Seiko, motorcycles for Ducati and Suzuki. He styled firearms for Beretta. In between big assignments, he even designed a new type of Italian pasta. In his car designs, there was a period where he was experimenting with a language of form called folded paper, used in cars such as VW Golf, DeLorean, and many others. This means shapes which were minimally curved in one direction only, like paper. They produced a clean, modern, and efficient aesthetic. He also had periods of beautifully outrageous sensual curves and elongated aerodynamic forms. The date is 1978. Nikon F2 is on the table as a reference for the discussions.
Io mi chiamo Giorgetto Giugiaro.
You can call me Giorgetto. I'm very pleased to meet the brilliant Nikon engineering team. Giorgetto-san, how do you design such beautiful machines every time? When I design cars, I question everything, the smallest detail. I ask how it should work and handle. Then the form follows function. Scusi, sometimes it's the other way around, you know? I design a beautiful form and the engineers like you fit the mechanics inside it, one way or another. I know a little bit about cameras, but you imagine non so niente. Imagine that I don't know, okay? Let's look at your last photo camera Nikon F2 while I sketch and work out the new F3. There are so many knobs and buttons here, it seems very crowded on the right side. And this thing is big and ugly here. Can you explain, per favore? Giorgetto-san, this is the film advance lever. It also acts as the on-off button for the light meter when you pull it out. This is the shutter button. Around it, we have another kind of on-off button, just for the shutter. You can also use it to set the shutter on T for long exposure. The actual shutter dial is here. ISO setting is on top attached to the finder because it only works with the finders that have light metering in them. The viewfinder also needs to talk to the lens to know the aperture range. This little window is the film counter. We need all of these features. Is it okay, Giorgetto-san? Un momento. We need a beautiful design. Elegante. Let me sketch and describe. We will combine everything into just two elements here. We put the shutter button in the middle of the advanced lever. But then that would be too far to the right and maybe not very comfortable for the finger. So we'll move the whole thing to the left and put the film counter on the right, okay? Wakarimashita. We can still keep the on-off ring around the shutter button if you like. We will get rid of all the complicated mechanics under the shutter button because we're going to make it electronic. Other cameras are doing it right. We will also get rid of this light meter on and off button thing. This can accidentally push in when you press your face against the camera. That's bad design. We will put it inside the shutter button. Then we just half press it to turn it on. Easy. Giorgetto-san, then how do we turn it off? Why do we have to turn it off? Let it run off by itself after a while. How about turn off after 16 seconds? Enough? Also, this lever feels a little stiff. Look, I think the gear ratio is too high. It's like starting a car in the third gear. We need a lower gear ratio. Maybe we need a wider stroke so it will feel much smoother. This one seems around 120 degrees. Let's make the new one 140 degrees. Now, why is the T setting combined on the on button here? Why isn't it together with all other shutter settings on the same dial? That's in fact what we'll do, okay? So far, we've got rid of several elements and cleaned up the right side. What's this huge ugly cylinder doing here? Giorgetto-san, this is the shutter speed, so the top of it needs to talk to the light meter in the finder. The cylinder rotates the real shutter dial at the bottom, which is attached to the body to regulate the shutter curtain. No problemo. I'll put the shutter dial only on the body, so we'll get rid of the ugly cylinder, okay? But how do we let the light meter here know what shutter speed we've selected? I thought the light came through the lens. Why is the light meter in here anyway? Because we have a mirror that reflects the light up and around into the finder. So we read the light in here. No problemo. Let's find a way to read the light inside the body, not inside this thing, okay? Wakarimashita. Other cameras have already done it. Let's look inside. Why can't we put a light sensor here? We can't put it in front of the mirror, otherwise you see it when you look inside. We can't put it behind the mirror because the mirror blocks the light hitting the sensor. But we have an idea. Maybe we can use a half mirror so it reflects most of the light up to the finder but lets some light through. Then we put another real mirror to reflect the light down to the bottom of the camera, and we read on the sensor there. Would that be okay, Giorgetto-san? Bellissimo, perfecto. How do you make a half mirror? We can make something like, say, 50,000 microdots which are not silvered, and light goes through. The rest of the mirror reflects the light to the eye as normal. From outside you cannot even tell that it is half mirror, but a small amount of light goes through to the sensor. So the light meter is in the camera body. We don't need this huge cylinder, right? Great, molto bene. How can I make this finder smaller? Giorgetto-san, we have to show the shutter speed and aperture setting inside here too. So we need a link between the lens and the finder. This coupling pin. Oh, no. That's primitivo, ugly, brutto. Let's find another way. Instead of putting this coupling pin on the finder, let's just put it on the camera. Okay, Giorgetto-san. Actually, we have developed these new lenses called AI, automatic index. They don't need the pin connection. They have this ridge on the back, so it rotates a little tab on the body. But we still need space to create a display for the shutter speed and aperture speed and the light meter recommendation. Okay, if the shutter and aperture information is in the body, we can also put these displays in the body. Then the finder just has to reflect them to the eye, right? So we don't need anything in the viewfinder except to reflect the image to the eye. Here is another idea. The actual aperture numbers are already on the ring around the lens. We only need to see them in a little window directly inside the viewfinder, okay? We're getting somewhere. Now, why do we have to read the shutter speed on this thin edge? I can't even see all the possible speeds, especially when the winder is folded back, which is most of the time, and half of them are on the other side anyway. Let's read all of them on top, which is much easier. Then we move the ISO dial to the other side, okay? Wakarimashita. We were thinking of making the shutter electronic and automatic. It's a risk, but other cameras are doing it. So when the aperture is selected, the camera can automatically select the shutter speed. It will be good to be able to lock it in that position. No problemo. But we don't need a separate lock. We can make it lock automatically when it reaches the automatic setting on the same dial. Then all we need is a way to unlock it for the manual setting. I can use a button like this one to unlock. By the way, what is this? This is for setting long exposure times from 2 seconds to 10 seconds. Then the long exposure times are manually set on the self-timer in the front. What? Che cosa? That makes no sense. Did you run out of space to put all the shutter speeds on the same dial? I'll find room to put all of them on one dial, including the auto setting, all the speeds, and the T setting. Then I'll use this button to unlock the auto setting. Let's now fix the other side. What's this thing? This is the film rewind knob in the middle, but a flash gun can attach to the top with an adapter. Adapter? For a brand new camera? That's not elegante. Let's have a flash gun design that attaches directly here without an adapter. Then maybe for older flash guns people can buy the adapter, if they want, okay? What's this? It's the flash connection to the finder to show that the flash is ready. There's no need for that. We agreed that the viewfinder doesn't need to do anything. we send all the information to the body only, then the finder just displays it. So let's put all the electronic contacts right here where space is available. Then we put the ISO dial at the bottom here. We set it by pulling it up and rotating it. Then it won't be confused with the rewind knob. Giorgetto-san, one more thing. With the automatic shutter, we need to give the users a way to override the system a little in difficult light conditions like backlighting. We think we need an exposure compensation system and an exposure lock system. Okay, I think I can fit your compensation dial right here. I'll give it a security button to press, to change, and avoid the accidental move. I'll find some space in the front somewhere for the exposure lock, so the users can press it with a spare finger. How do you open the film back? We unfold and twist this tab at the bottom and it opens. But unfortunately we have a motor drive that covers it, complicating the film change. No problemo. I'll bring that to the top and combine it with the rewind knob. The two are related anyway. So when we pull it up, it can also open the back. Easy. I'll also give it a security button so that it will not accidentally pop open when you're trying to change the ISO. Let's now look at the front. What's this? Depth of field preview and mirror lockup. Non capisco. But whatever it is, we'll keep it. I don't see any problems. I know what this is, a self-timer. But it looks very old-fashioned, like an old mechanical clock or something. Let's get rid of it. If the shutter button is electronic, we can just use an electronic timer, not an old spring-operated timer. I'll give you a button for it here and an indicator light to see in the front. We can fix the time to say 10 seconds. Enough? Then we will have some room here to put your exposure lock button. The question is, which finger should we use to press it at the same time as the shutter? Hard question. Never mind. Users will work something out. What's next? Giorgetto-san, if we make everything electronic, when the battery is low, it will not operate at all. For a professional camera, this is really bad. We think we need a limited mechanical backup. So if the battery dies, the user can manually trigger at least one shutter speed. For example, 1/60th of a second. Can we do that? Okay, no problemo. But I don't want to complicate the normal shutter button, which already has two electronic functions, half press for light meter and full press to release the shutter. I'll give you another button, maybe around the new exposure lock, similar to the one for mirror lockup. But to avoid confusion and accidental use, I'll park it right next to the lens and make it difficult to trigger accidentally. You will have to pull it out, then use it. That should solve the problem. Now, we're ready to look at the form of the body. I would like to use the idea of folded paper that I've used in car designs. Surfaces which don't look like molded and rounded putty, but made of surfaces which gently and beautifully curve only in one direction, like paper. I start with this finder. This surface here would be like the front of some of my cars. This would be the roof, and this would be like the hatchback. The sides would be like the windows. Capisci? Do you see it? In the front, I think we need something that invites strong grabbing and holding. Another thing that people grab and shoot is a gun. So let's take some design clues from gun handles. That will give us a strong form. Finally, I would like a dash of color. All black is boring and looks like a lot of other cameras. I would like bright red as a signature, so from a distance people can tell this is something special, like a fast and exclusive sports car. So, what do you think? Do you agree? It's time to say goodbye to the design of the old camera F2? Yes, Giorgetto-san. Wakarimashita. And so this iconic hero camera was developed. Initially, some professionals resisted the full electronic shutter system and battery dependence, but this resistance soon disappeared and convenience won. It also helped that almost all other camera manufacturers went down the same path and more. Nikon F3 had one of the longest production runs of all cameras and brands. It sold over 750,000 units over 21 years, even as its two successors, F4 and F5, both designed by Maestro Giugiaro, started production. So was the popularity of the F3. Many camera lovers still regard it as the best SLR film camera ever made. You can reserve your judgment until we finish all the Nikon F Professional episodes. If you have made it this far, please, before you go further, take a moment, pause the video, click subscribe, and like. Then continue. Next comes the dirty laundry. The Padawans can leave us now. This is for the grown-ups and the patient people. Here's our dirty laundry list. Unlike Nikon F2, the film counter only shows every 5 numbers. F2 showed even numbers, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. This shows 0, 5, 10, 15, etc. Now, can you tell me where we are now? Is it 9 or is it 11? Who knows? The shutter speed, like Nikon F2, is stepless. However, unlike Nikon F2, it's very hard to put it in between because they're so close to each other that as soon as you turn it, it snaps to the next one. You might be lucky to get it exactly between two before it snaps to one or the other. In Nikon F2, there was plenty of room and you could put it anywhere in between. The battery in Nikon F3 is 2 times LR44, which is very welcome because they're easy to find, with a positive side up. That's where it goes. There is no battery check, however. You look inside the viewfinder, and if you see something on the LCD inside, it means that the battery is working. But Nikon itself says the LCD on these is rated for 6 years. After that, it's likely to fail. And of course, Nikon doesn't provide a replacement. So, if the LCD is not working, or if it's faulty, how do you know? Is it the LCD or is it the battery? No idea. Let's say we put this on the T setting. If you charge the shutter and press this, it remains open until you change this to any other setting, okay? But the manual says, don't do it this way. What? Why not? Because during that whole long exposure, the battery is being drained. So it says, no, don't do it that way. Instead of using this shutter button, use this awkward manual shutter, which you have to pry off the edge there with your nail, like that, very hard. Okay, you pull it out. And you have to use that for the T setting instead of this one, otherwise you may drain the battery. So how do you do that? Well, the way you do that is you have to turn the camera off. The manual says you put camera on off, which is counterintuitive. Put it on T, then use the manual shutter, right? That's the way you do it without using the battery. Okay, that was a bit counterintuitive, not guessable. The flash sync speed is any speed up to 1/60th of a second, which is marked in red for that purpose. Okay, anything slower is fine. However, 1/60th of a second is not the highest speed that it can sync with the flash. If you want higher than that, you can go to 1/80th of a second by putting this on the X, and it locks on the X. So why did they put 1/80th on this dial? Why did they have to put another one over there? Who knows? Considering this is automatic shutter with the A setting over here, you may want to lock the exposure for backlighting situations or deeply varying lighting conditions in the same scene. So Nikon has given you an exposure lock button over here, but it is in the most awkward position. It's not clear which finger you're supposed to use for it. If your index finger is on the shutter button, which of these fingers is available to press this button down here? Now this is a pretty big hand, okay? So this is here. Which finger can reach over there? This is very awkward with this finger. Very awkward. Maybe the little finger, but it's not strong enough to press that very strong button. It is actually quite awkward. I must say, ergonomically not ideal. The light meter is an LCD inside the finder. In order to preserve battery, Nikon has decided that after 16 seconds it turns off. In the auto setting, it's not a problem, because inside you're just seeing the confirmation of what the camera has selected for you and you take the shot. Even if you don't see anything, it's still okay. The camera knows what that setting is. But when you go off the A and you try to do it manually, you're testing a few things with the shutter and aperture, you run out of time, and within 16 seconds it turns off on you. Now no matter what you're doing, even if you're in the middle of dialing this up or down, it still turns off on you. That is bad design. It should have been such that when you are touching things, it should reset the 16 seconds and not turn off on you, but it does. The issue of the first few shots. Once you put a film in, you're supposed to wind until this gets to number 1. Actually, number 1 doesn't appear in this window. It has number 0 and 1 is a little dot after that. Anyway, most people, like me, are greedy and try to preserve the first few shots after you load the film. You might be lucky and get 1 or even 2 extra shots out of the roll, if you're careful. If you're like me, you might even load the film in the dark room and definitely get 1, 2, or even 3 shots extra. However, Nikon, in its wisdom, has decided that up to the point where this gets to number 1, whatever you've selected on this dial doesn't matter. If it's more than 1/25th of a second, all the way to 1/2000th of a second, it will ignore it. It will shoot at 1/80th of a second, which is not even here. Therefore, whatever you thought you were measuring inside the finder is overwritten and is wrong. So what's that for? The logic apparently is that when they introduced the A setting, as people were loading the film in the test groups, for example, they're trying to shoot to get to number 1 with the lens cap on. The light meter inside the lens sees total darkness and it gives you 6 full seconds or 8 full seconds or something ridiculous. Okay, so people think that the camera is faulty, not working, not taking a shot, but it's actually waiting for the previous shot to finish. So Nikon decided to override the A setting and make this shoot at 1/80th of a second anyway. And then in an obscure place in the manual, under the wrong heading of film counter of all things, it tells you that it's going to shoot at 1/80th of a second. Now nobody knows about that and it drives people crazy. Now they decided to apply the same rule to the manual settings too. Presumably the manual people know what they're doing, but it decided that between 1/25th and 2000th of a second, it still applies 1/80th of a second, making you doubly mad. There is counter-argument that can't be the reason. Why? Because if you go for something even slower, for example, actually 8 seconds, it then obeys your order and it actually gives you 8 seconds even in the blank shots at the beginning. So that's where the logic falls down, right? So for the slow speeds, it obeys your order, and for high speeds, it goes to a lower speed. What's going on here? If anybody knows the real logic, please let me know, because I'm having sleepless nights. I mentioned to you before that the one that goes a lot further than previous Nikons, 140 degrees this way and another 30 degrees this way. So a wide arc. If habitually you go a bit less than the full arc, then at the same time you try to do manual shutter release, this one, what happens? The mirror goes up and gets stuck up there. You think that camera is broken. What have I done? Nothing. But the reality is that even with half-cock shutter, the mirror works, the camera itself doesn't work, so you have to go back here and complete this, then it shoots, which means that your shot is lost because you're pointing to the sky. All right, so remember that. Now the same thing can happen, unfortunately, if you try to do depth of field preview and you don't press it all the way down because it's so stiff. You go halfway down and you think that's enough, I can see it. And then at that point, if you shoot, the mirror goes up and gets stuck again. Okay, so two ways the mirror can get stuck, with this and with this. On F3, self-time is electronic and it's set for only 10 seconds. This blinks for 10 seconds. Then it shoots. It's unfortunate because in F2 and F, you have all the settings between 2 seconds and 10 seconds. 2 seconds in particular is very useful because it's a replacement for cable release. Set it on 2 seconds, press this, take your hand off, it shoots by itself without any vibration. This cannot do that because you're stuck with 10 seconds. One more issue, unlike previous Nikons, which had the mechanical self-timer, which you set and you shoot when it reaches the clicky time, then it resets itself. You don't have to do anything. With this camera, however, you put this on the dot here, you shoot. But does it snap back? No, it doesn't snap back. And half the time, at least I, forget that I've done that. So the camera is like this, you keep shooting, nothing is happening. What's going on? Again, something is wrong somewhere. What have I done? It is still on. So every shoot is trying to go on the 10-second timer. And when you're pointing at the sky trying to figure out what's going on, then it shoots for you. Because that doesn't snap back. A bit of a problem. Inside the viewfinder here, on the top left, you have a small and long LCD display, one of the earliest in existence. The LCD shows your chosen shutter speed if you're on the manual setting, and it has a big M with a plus and minus sign next to it. Minus means you're underexposed, plus means you're overexposed, do something about it. So you either rotate the shutter or aperture until you get both minus and plus at the same time. But in which direction should I rotate this? Left or right? No idea. So you might go all the way, nothing happens, you're still in the plus mode or minus mode, go the other way until accidentally one of them is okay. Or you overshoot and go back. Unintuitive, I would say. Other cameras, including, say, predecessor Nikon F2, at least gave you an arrow in which direction to go. At least in relation to the aperture ring, it was also intuitive. It's the same direction as you have to rotate. This doesn't tell you in which direction to rotate. The LCD is quite dim. In low light, not even dark, in low light, it's impossible to see. So Nikon has thoughtfully given you a little light inside. But where's the button for it? Somewhere obvious? Not really. It is the tiniest button over there. It doesn't even look like a button. It looks like one of those fake LEDs like these. You're supposed to press that and hold it. Inside it gives you the dimmest possible light that Nikon's own manual says it is a grain of wheat light, which is dim but adequate. I have no idea what grain of wheat means here. And the other statement is 50% correct. It is dim, but it is totally inadequate, and it turns off after a microsecond. So, The LCD light are categorized as completely useless. Nikon decided that the LCD should not constantly move around as you point at different things. That would have been distracting. So it decided that it only changes twice in a second. Actually, a second is a very long time as you're moving things around. If it only reads every half a second, sometimes drives you crazy, thinking that the camera is sluggish, the battery is weak, etc. But in fact, it's a feature built into the camera. One more thing about the LCD display. Even though in all modes, manual and automatic, shutter is stepless inside the camera itself, display is not stepless. So if the correct shutter speed in reality is 1/100th of a second, okay, stepless, and 100 is a very nice round number, it doesn't show you that. It shows you 125, as in 1/25th of a second. That was the wisdom of the engineers at the time. Create the perfect stepless system, don't show it to you, and don't let you properly click onto anything you want. Display of slow speeds inside the viewfinder. Okay, by default, the numbers for shutter speeds are shown in full numbers. For example, when it says 250, it doesn't mean 250 seconds. It means 1/250, 1/250th of a second. So that's easy to read. Well, what happens when you get to full seconds? Okay, 1 is still 1, but is 2 seconds or half a second? Which one is it? Inside the viewfinder, in order to make that clear, the numbers which are to be read as 1/, are just shown exactly like that. But the full seconds have a minus sign to the right-hand side. Okay? Right-hand side. Hold that thought. Now, if you go all the way and you still have underexposure, the number will have a minus sign to the left side. So if you have a full second and it's still underexposure, let's say you're on 4 and it's still not enough, you need to go to 8, it will have a minus sign on the right and a minus sign on the left. If on the other hand, you have a full second, one of these orange ones, and it is overexposure, you have a minus sign on the right and a positive sign on the left. Are you following all this? Let's talk about AI and non-AI lenses. This is an AI or auto-indexing lens. It does not use the rabbit ears over here. It's just there for backward compatibility. All right? If you want to use one of your collection of non-AI lenses from the past, if you put them in, habitually put it in, it gets stuck. It can get stuck really badly too. What you have to do is to remember to press this button over here and lift this thing up. Let me just do it for you. Press this and lift it up. And this tab will be out of the way. And then non-AI lenses will rotate around without getting stuck with that tab. I wouldn't call that good design. If your own old lenses get stuck with something that you invented. Okay? This could have gone out of the way by the rotation of the lens itself if a little bit more thought had been put into it. There's also some clean laundry.
コインランドリー
Let's have a look at it together. The multiple exposure. There's a small lever over here, very conveniently located at the top. You don't have to reach inside of your camera case or something to press the rewind button and try to do crazy stuff for multiple exposure. What you can do is to just turn this knob to the right, wind, it instantly snaps back. In the meantime, it has just cocked the shutter, but it has not advanced the film at all. You can take a shot. You can do this as many times as you like. It will take multiple exposure shots. That should make all 5 of you who use multiple exposure very happy. The rest of us will do it on Photoshop. The metering system in Nikon F3 is center weighted, but more center weighted than F2. It's so-called 80-20. 80% from the center circle, which is 12 millimeters, and 20% of the rest of the frame. Nikon F2 was 60-40, 60% the 12 millimeter circle and 40% the whole of the frame. This is more precise, and people swear by the metering system of this, even today. One of the first implementations of the viewfinder shutter, which is this lever over here, you do this, and the red shutter closes it off. Why is that necessary? Well, imagine that inside the reflex mirror is a half mirror, so light can go through it. Light can go through it in this direction, or light can go through it in that direction. Goes to where? To the sensor. The sensor is at the bottom of the camera from another mirror that reflects the light down. But that chamber is exposed. When your eye is here, it prevents most of the light from going through the reflecting through the mirror down to the light sensor. But when this is on a tripod, you're away from it, what then? Okay, for that you have this shutter. Just like its predecessors, Nikon F3 also has a shopping mall full of accessories. You can get many different viewfinders, and inside the viewfinder you can get 21 different focusing screens like this one. Unfortunately, these focusing screens are not interchangeable with F2 and F, and the method of changing them is different too. You no longer have a button to press and for this to pop out. Now you have to use your finger underneath that section over there, and you lift this up actually like this. You press it down, it goes in. Arguably, it's even easier than before. In conclusion, this camera has a very important role in camera history. The role of the star designer should not be underestimated. He set the scene for camera design that lasted for decades. The successors to this had an even greater influence than this one on the whole camera industry, all the way to digital cameras such as the 850. This is not a perfect camera. The ergonomics in future generations of Nikon F by the same designer have solved even more problems than this. This solved a shopping list of problems in F2 and F, but it created some oddities of its own, which we looked at through the dirty laundry. But all of those are forgivable because it's a wonderful camera. The price is going up by the second it appears. If you can afford one of these today in mint condition, I suggest you go and get one because you will not regret it. Many people swear by this as the best SLR camera ever made. If you've reached this point and you still haven't pressed that button to subscribe, here's your last chance, because otherwise you might be missing on all the future episodes of this and 300 cameras that we're going to cover.